Just that I put like closer and closer to you just to see if maybe. Mute. Yeah.
What was that?
If you don't, I don't know if YouTube changed or not, but you have to make sure that you're not, you have to select and then.
Okay.
Yeah. It's video and. I can't explain it better than that.
That's fine.
I just never.
Okay, I will call to order this first monthly meeting of the new year. January the 9th, 2024. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No.
Hearing all nopes, we will move to the consent agenda, which includes our abstract for the month and our meeting minutes. We'll look through the abstract. This would actually be from bills in December, I believe.
Correct.
So we have a general fund abstract totaling $469,170.92. Including some large state retirement contributions. We have EMS billing abstract totaling $59,824.87. Water fund abstract totaling $49,763.37. Sewer fund abstract total in addition, we have meeting minutes from December the 11th and December the 19th. And so I would entertain a motion to accept and adopt the consent agenda as presented.
So second.
Any comments or questions? Anything we need to address? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting the consent agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, item number 4 is our first public comment period. We have one member of the public attending online. Tony, if you have anything you'd like to chime in on, now is the time.
I don't, thanks.
All right, thanks, Tony. With no other members of the public present, we'll move right along to reports of representatives. As Mary from the town is in her own meeting across the street at the moment. Did everyone see the email from Ann?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so we have an email report from Ann Corman of the Tompkins County Legislature provided to the board, and Mary Bouchard from the town of Ulysses is in a town of Ulysses meeting. So we will move to item number 6, which is reports from this board. The only item I have for this board to consider is it came to my attention, I think it made some news headlines, that I don't know if it was part of a bill or what package it was a part of, but there is available through New York State a volunteer fire infrastructure and response equipment grant program. It has just come available in the last several weeks. Essentially, the program offers funding to 100% only volunteer fire companies and or municipalities whose fire departments are staffed by 100% volunteers, no paid staff of any kind. The grant money would be for the construction, renovation, or purchase costs related to critical facilities, including buildings, training facilities, etc., or for the purchase of fire service equipment. The village would qualify based on those criteria. I have asked MRB, since they do most of our grant writing now, to put together a proposal for the cost to write the grant. What I have asked them to write the grant for is the maximum award possible, which is $1 million, to be used towards our ongoing search for money for a new fire hall. We are, to the best of my ability, still alive for the possibility of congressional funding. We have just over a $3 million request, I believe it is, included in the House's version of the budget. That assumes they ever put together a budget. So it's not part of ongoing continuing resolutions to keep the government funded and open. This would be the next actual budget, federal budget that's done. If we are able to be put into the full bill, would allocate that money. So we're still waiting on that. This is clearly obviously something completely different. So what we have for us to consider is a proposal for the grant services. MRB will prepare the application, all of the documents necessary, answer project-specific questions. All of this is submitted through New York State's e-grants systems. They'll do the coordination with the village. And the total estimated cost to prepare the grant and get it filed, et cetera, is $4,800. The application due date for the grant is April 30th, so that will give them just over 3 months. No comments, questions?
I think it's great.
Do we have a sense of how long we would have to spend the money?
3 years from award date.
Oh, that's good. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So my conversations with MRB, basically they said, if we get so if the application date is April, the awards come out sometime this fall, presumably there'll be a federal budget by sometime in 2024. Optimistically to, fund 2024. If we are included in that budget and we're awarded this, then we'll be roughly halfway to the Cadillac version of a new facility. My thought is maybe 2/3 of the way towards a scaled down version of the new facility. If we were awarded this grant money and not included in the federal budget,
That's why the and/or equipment line was in there.
no, I'm actually now considering the possibility that we might have to pull off the shelf and dust off the plans that MRB put together back in 2016 or 2017, retrofit the existing fire hall. I cannot see either of these departments going another 3 to 5 years under current conditions.
Wasn't the retrofit?
$1.5 million.
Oh, was it that? I was thinking it was 2.
It was $1.5 million in 2016, so it could be 2.5 now.
Right, but that's approachable.
That's approachable, and the thought, and I remember the public information meeting we had in 2016, 2017, that that's too much for the village to spend. Post-COVID and with a 400 square mile service area for EMS, I think you never want to put yourself in a position to get voted out of office for one decision. But if there was one, I think that would be a hill to die on. But on the positive side, if we get this, if we can stay in the congressional appropriations package, if we can do something more along those lines, that would be fantastic. I'm still in chase the money wherever you can find it mode. Yeah. Other thoughts?
Have we done this before? We hired grant assistants before? Just didn't know, couldn't recall off the top of my head if we had done this before and how it all worked out.
Yeah, they just filed this week the grant application for Main Street sidewalk grant money.
Oh, okay.
Good. And we stormwater, we got 30,000.
I think there was something to that. They've applied for water infrastructure as well.
They did the grant. Well, they did the grant and loan application stuff for the water system and the sewer plant. So they've been doing more and more of this. When we first started using MRB a long time ago, they didn't do grant writing. That's one of the things they've expanded. Significantly. I've thought from time to time about wouldn't it be nice to have an in-house grant writer. But I think between the skill set required, which would dictate a certain pay scale, plus benefits,
I agree.
probably
Yeah.
worth it to pay us a contractor on a per case basis.
They also keep a really tight eye on all these different programs that are coming through generally, and yeah, there's a lot of benefit outside of just the grant writing itself too.
I was interested when I actually forget how it came across. I think it came from New York State, one of their mass emails, hey, you know, the government. They hadn't actually looked into the details yet to see if we would qualify. They weren't, I don't know that they were aware that our fire department was still 100% volunteer. So once we looked into it, we see that we do qualify. Other thoughts, comments? If not, then I would entertain a motion to accept and approve this proposal for grant services from MRB Group for a cost not to exceed $4,800 for grant writing services related to the Volunteer Fire Infrastructure and Response Equipment Grant Program. So moved.
Second.
Any additional comments or questions?
Fire infrastructure response equipment, fire, get it. It's very nice. Someone spent a lot of time there, and I appreciate that work.
Yes. That intern deserves a raise. If there are no other questions or comments, then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That's it from myself. Speaking of fire and chamber.
Fire, it was pretty quiet, 19 calls for December. Year to date, 278 total calls. I didn't get the total breakdown because he talked too fast, but they are going to attempt the New York State radio grant again that we have never gotten, but they're going to attempt to get that grant again. I think that's in the fall, but they would find out about that. And nothing with chamber, but one thing to add to the fire company is our wonderful Christmas program that they run. They did 177 gifts and got a lot of really lovely responses from people and letters from kids. So I've had a lot of people reach out to me and reach out to them to find out how they love it so much in the village that they wanted to know how to help. So one of the discussions at the fire meeting would be that maybe there was a way that they can coordinate a few more volunteers. It's a pretty well-oiled machine, but it is the same people that do it every year, obviously. Kudos to Patty Dodge, who just runs a magnificent program, and she does, you know, the majority of the heading of the work and getting the volunteers and everything. But I would say that if you would really like to do something, send a check to the fire company and just earmark that money for the Christmas program, and they'll make sure that that goes into their coffers to help with the expenses of that and make that better every year. So I think it's just a wonderful thing that we do. And a wonderful thing that they do, I should say. The tables are here that they ordered that we agreed to pay half for, so they will be invoicing us for that half, which is $1,200. And other than that, I did not make the chamber holiday end of the year thing because I had family obligations, but other than that, that's it.
And if anyone within the sound of my voice would like to make a donation, as Marcia mentioned, for any of the operations of the fire company, like Letters to Santa, please make that payable to the Trumansburg Fire Company.
Right.
If you make it payable to the Trumansburg Fire Department, it will disappear in our general fund. So please pay attention to how those checks are made out.
And currently the membership is, we have 46 fire company members and 39 of them are firefighters. So it's a nice number compared to a lot of other villages.
Okay. EMS Youth Street Tree Advisory Committee.
I don't have much to report this month. I will do the calls. So Covert, Town of Covert is 12. Town of Enfield 3, Hector 7, Interlaken 2, Lodi 1, Mecklenburg 5, Ovid 2, Romulus 1, Village 30, Ulysses 24. 87 total. This is the first month in a long time that Ithaca wasn't on there, so that's fantastic. But aside from that, I missed the youth commission meeting this month, so I'll let Keith report on that. I don't know if you were there. The one piece that I would add is just that we've submitted our applications to the county for their piece of the funding. This was one of the things that was kind of up in the air with the Cornell Cooperative Extension contract talks, and I was very happy with how it turned out, and I'm very excited with the plan for programming moving forward. So we'll see how the county responds, obviously, but it feels like a very exciting and optimistic time. That's all I've got.
Is there anything you want to add about?
Youth.
Yeah, I think the only other things we really talked about was the idea, I think there was a unanimous opinion that the town should not contract for, there was a debate about, specifically about just contracting for, one example was photography for the teams. Like, should the town be in the business of dealing with vendors or selecting vendors and vetting vendors and bidding, all that stuff, and kind of the I think the consensus was there's enough. It's easy enough to find photographers who do everything. If the coaches and the parents of each team decide they want to do that, then they can pursue it individually. But the town, for several reasons, doesn't want to be in the business of managing vendor relationships for all of the different recreational programs. And then kind of along those lines, something I brought up was getting the discussion going with the school district to see what would need to happen to allow youth sports and even adult recreation that goes through the town to be able to access school facilities during breaks and closures. Because right now, if the school's not open, nothing can happen there. And typically that's because the school wants there to at least be a custodian in the building for a practice or recreation to happen. But as we talked about it, we thought there might be a possibility of, doing some sort of, quote unquote, cleaning fee deposit or something to kind of put money down to say if we break something, we're putting out a deposit or extra insurance liability or whatever it would take, because as most of you know, especially this time of year, if you can't get into a gym in the school, like, you have nowhere to go. And this was not just about sports. One thing I brought up was, so it can be, depending on when Christmas falls, it can be a full 2-week break and kids have nowhere to go to get energy out. So you could just do different activities within the school during that break and stuff. So what would that look like? And so there was going to be some people that were going to meet with the school district on that, to talk that out further. That's it.
Okay. DPW water sewer CPZR farmers connect.
I have very little to report, honestly. Really only to say that CPZR continues to work on commercial zoning. That's kind of our focus right now, and extending that, as I mentioned last time, but across looking at all of Main Street as a opportunity for mixed use, that recognizing that there really is quite a bit of mixed use already on Main Street. But those conversations just kind of continue to move forward. Other than that, really nothing else to report. The only other thing was some of the old business that we have. So
Police, Chief.
Start with our call report. 194 calls of service for the month of December, including 1 unattended death / cardiac arrest investigation, 1 harassment, 1 larceny and theft, and 1 motor vehicle crash investigation. Outside of that, we're doing, Chief continues to conduct a lot of interviews for additional part-timers and continues to have interviews with, I shouldn't say interviews, conversations. I don't think anything, some interviews have happened. But having conversations with folks who might be good fits for the kind of hybrid position of sergeant and full-time officer position. So we kind of talked about some of the numbers there, what that would look like. We could be looking at some retirement soon. So trying to do a lot of planning for having an adequate roster come springtime. There's been, let me double check my notes. I want to make sure I get this right. So, yeah, a lot of the hiring seems to depend on candidates' abilities to get into police academies to get the training that they need. And so it's a bit of a juggling act to find an academy that's for one candidate in particular needs to get phase 2 of his training done before phase 1 expires. And that's going to be, may have missed the last academy opportunity to do that. Thank you to Jessica and for helping out with helping us get our retirement up to date with some of our officers. And I think that's it for police. And then ETC, the main thing to discuss there is in terms of the actual work on the water tower area, the parking area is complete. And this is a report from Jen Demerish. We're in a holding pattern with regards to the berms. So really what the focus is right now is getting the first public meeting set for discussing what else to do with the space. We're going to be meeting about that in early February with the hopes of having a meeting at the end of February, an official public meeting at the end of February. But there's going to be a meeting to talk about the meeting on in mid-February.
So this is the meeting where we're talking about the meeting to talk about the meeting.
It's the meeting where we're going to talk about the meeting. So some other ETS updates. Winter banners arrived on the same day as the snow, so DPW has them and we'll hang them soon. And oh yes, I should have mentioned that this public meeting is going to be in partnership with the T-Bird Chamber. So we will be connecting with the chamber once we have dates, more concrete dates. But yeah, looking at the end of February for that. So if you have ideas, anybody out there, if you have ideas, and I know you do, that'll be the time.
Okay. Treasurer's office.
Treasurer's office. So we have moved, by the end of business on this is Tuesday, Thursday, I expect all 3 of our reserve funds, less $5,000 and pending referendum expenditures will be moved to night class. It's very exciting. We remember the approval you all gave for this much more lucrative interest fund. MRB, the first MRB reimbursement request for the Crescent Way development came. So that was in the abstract that you approved, but I am then of course billing INHS to get that back. And I have reconciled the bank statements through November. And two of the three major funds are through December, but I'd like to consult with, Williamson, because I don't really love the way the reports print, and make sure that that's good. I'm hoping to look, like when you get the whole expenses and revenues document to see, so you can see where we really are vis-a-vis the budget, at this point of year. So I'm hoping to have that for you by next meeting. They are very busy in Williamson tidying up the rest of their world's fiscal year end, and terrifying payroll realities. Treasurer, before I move on to items of clerkdom, does anyone have specific treasurer concerns?
On the money side of things. And the NICLAS current yield as of today is 5.275.
Damn.
So exciting.
So we will earn more on those reserve accounts going forward.
It's super secure too. It's kind of fun. Like you have to get a secret call. You have to have someone else get a secret call. It's great. Okay, so let's see. We began in-house water payments are possible if you come in with a credit card. That is, so we've always been able. You can always come for your water and sewer bills to pay by cash, pay by check at the village office. You can come with your credit card. Those third-party fees still apply. We are currently not taking payments over the phone. We will investigate the efficiency for all concerned through this billing cycle and see if we change that for next. There is also the possibility that you can submit for a village election absentee ballot, which is a newer addition. You could do that for other elections, but now you can do it for village. The Tompkins County Board of Elections is the best place to get that information. I will surface that email link to that URL either in this newsletter or next week's newsletter. I think that's it. The other thing that we're really focusing on in the office now that it's January is cleaning up all of our HR files. Keith mentioned the nice letter, the New York State retirement reporting being in line, but that's just saying, let's get the HR files with a look towards the personnel policy. And Jen has something I think to say about migration to Microsoft amongst other things, but I'm hoping that once we get there, then we can really do better work on the personnel policy once we're in Office 365 and Dropbox. Before I pass it over to my fantastic colleague, does anyone have any clerk questions?
I just have a question about the office. I know early on we were talking about getting quotes for carpeting and paint and things like that. Where are we?
We have,
Lighting.
yeah.
That's fantastic.
They did the ceiling, so the ceiling is completed. We have properly placed cans, thanks largely to the mayor's idea of a grid and our great DPW staff, especially Clint and Tyler Trask, and Tyler and his wife Ani just welcomed a new baby girl on Saturday, and we got to see her. They're all doing really great, and so is the big brother who's 4. And okay, so next is we are getting a second quote on carpet, which might come in $1,000 less than the original quote. So once I have something solid, we'll approve that. But next phase will be painting the walls. Paint is already isolated, and then the carpet. So we're scheduling it in with them. It's happening, and they've been great, great collaborators. Yeah, thank you. It's been a huge improvement, especially for Jennifer's desk.
Yeah, I can see my dad's nice lighting there.
Wouldn't it be nice to have a lovely office to work in?
Yeah.
Those are all my words.
Started working with Williamson to get the sewer rates changed for the next billing cycle, so that they're pretty, like Jess mentioned, pretty swamped with some end of year things right now, but will be in place soon. Microsoft 365, my favorite topic. We are now approved to get the government licenses, so I'm going to be working with John Brem to get that scheduled, hopefully sometime in the next month. He said he's fairly open, so try to get that coordinated with some other folks that are currently running our email system and our website. So hopefully we'll get that set up. And I'll be sending out email as I learn more. And I'm really deep in water bill payments right now. So that has been a big focus of what I've been doing the last few days. And I think that's it. Anybody have any questions for me? Okay.
Okay. Item number 7 is old business. We have a resolution to establish a policy for the voluntary termination of water and sewer service under specific circumstances.
Yes, so after our conversation last month, I kind of had a couple more conversations with Tom and Dusty, and pretty much where we left it last month is where it still stands. The idea being that should a resident or I guess water and sewer user want to terminate their service during construction, we would allow them to do that if that work is significant enough such that they'll need a certificate of occupancy at the end of that. So that's a fairly large amount of work. And at that time, we would pull their meter, charge them money for doing so. And then once they decide that they would like the meter replaced, again with another charge, they could be on their way. And in the interim, we would not bill them for water or sewer usage at that time. So just so I know that I had everything kind of written out, I wrote this resolution, which is long-ish, but I'm happy to read it through if that would be helpful. Otherwise, if people want to take a look at it, we could just kind of discuss the details. Happy to go either way.
I liked it. I think my only addition potentially would be a minimum time. So in a different, like I like the certificate of occupancy qualification, but also, you know, if it was like a minimum of 6 months or a minimum of a certain amount of time, to me that, I mean, it kind of does the same thing to a certain degree, but it feels like a slightly higher threshold.
Yeah.
My only thought.
It's interesting. I like the idea. I don't know, like reasonably, like, I guess I don't know what number to pick there is where I'm unclear, like.
So where I'm coming from is like Roden mentioned the idea of a snowbird, you know,
Right.
like shutting it off in the winter when they're going. So my only thinking is just longer than that as a way to prevent that. But I mean, it could be that, you know, a fast rehab or something, you know, maybe is faster than that turnaround.
Right,
I don't
I'm
know,
wondering, right, if someone were motivated and kind of did a fast renovation on it,
right.
could it be
Especially if they're living
3 months? The other reason I was thinking of having the fee and making it really reflect the DPW's time and overhead of the front office and all those different pieces, and have it be in the order of like $100 or something.
Well, and the fee actually could be a functional time limit, right? It could be as long as the fee makes it so it's more expensive to shut it off.
Yeah,
For say 3 months or whatever it is.
I think, right, and I think it depends a little bit on the situation. If you're talking about a 4-unit apartment building and each one is getting charged $100-ish bucks every 2 months, that means it's a little bit shorter. If it's your own individual residence, if the concern is a snowbird, then $100 to turn it off and $100 to turn it on is, you're not going to do that. Whether every like 3 to 4 months at most, right? You kind of wouldn't break even otherwise.
Yeah, that's true. I think that probably functions the same way. It's just
Yeah.
the economics of it. Yeah, that's good.
Has everyone had a chance to read it?
Yeah.
I think there's a spelling error in the second to last line.
Yeah, that's true.
Is it clerk? That's clerk.
Village, this is.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
Client damn autocorrect.
I will update that.
Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
You're very transparent front office. It's a good thing.
Oh, the village clerk. All right, then I would move the resolution as written with that amendment to say village clerk.
Second.
Any additional comments or questions? And just for those who may listen to the recording, we're not going to read the entire resolution. It'll be available on the village website or in the village office. But essentially, this resolution establishes a function where, as Ben said, the village is establishing a new policy whereby A resident may voluntarily terminate their water and sewer service if they have an active building permit, which will require a new certificate of occupancy at the conclusion of the construction project. So if you're not living there, similar to building a brand new house, if you're not living there and there's a significant construction project going on, then it makes perfect sense that you may not need water and sewer. So there's no need to pay for it at that time. Any other comments? Hearing none, and all in favor of adopting this resolution as amended with a type of correction, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any other items of the old business?
So I think the one thing probably to add to this is to establish that fee. So I said in the resolution, just we'll establish it from time to time. So I would move that the fee be $100 for removal or installation of water meter for this termination policy.
I'll second.
Motion and a second, $100 termination fee, $100 reconnection fee. Any thoughts, comments, or questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any other items of old business? All right, new business. We have our annual State of the Village going on. Probably 11, 12, 13 years at this point. That we need to set a date for. Historically, we have done the first weekend in February. I can tell you that my weekends are no good until February the 24th. Is that too late? Will anybody be distantly out of town at that point?
That's
We'll
the
have forgotten
end of,
everything I wanted to say.
yeah, that's the end of school vacation.
Is it?
It is. Yeah, I don't know if that's,
Do we dare say March 2nd?
I'm happy with that. I don't
Yeah.
have any,
it's Eva's birthday, but I suppose in the morning I probably could be available. I don't have anything planned just yet.
Any other dates work better for anyone?
We'll come in like a lion.
Do we want to entertain Sundays at all? Or is that not a good plan? Is that's probably maybe not a good plan.
Probably not Sunday mornings.
yeah, some days it's tougher, so.
Yeah,
So we'll say Saturday, March the 2nd, 9 AM as usual. Does that sound right? Fire hall, let's make sure it's available. I don't think they usually have anything on Saturdays.
Sometimes there's training, but I'm sure we can work around that.
I think this far out we should be okay, but let's
Will there be?
double check in the morning.
Will there be late refreshment?
Sure.
When would you like the postcards?
Let's send them out if we can. What's today? Almost halfway through January.
Yeah,
If we get them out, let's say
First.
late the week of the 22nd, like towards the end of this month.
Oh, okay,
Because I know some people kind of expect State of the Village in
for
February.
February, okay.
Yeah. And so.
So I'm saying the last week of January. Okay, we'll mock something up and send it out for all of you to view. Okay.
Topics that we know we want to cover for the postcard. Anything that we know for sure. Well, I think by then we'll certainly have a Camp Barton update.
Mm.
No, it's not really government work, but I'm guessing. There might be questions about progress of South Street development. So that's
Yeah,
something
there
we
might be.
want to talk about, or is that just something we maybe expect comes out of Q&A? It's not really our work, so it doesn't really.
yeah, I feel like we've tended to shy away from speaking on behalf of the
Yeah.
project. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing if someone wanted to come and say a few words, but I don't, again, know if
That's
that's
a good-
quite the right forum. I could go either way on that.
I know they've been trying to keep people informed on Facebook, but I think there's also been some. For what I've read, they've. Feel like that's only come back to hurt them by trying to over communicate things, and so now they've started to pull back on that, so. But they might be willing to do.
Maybe
something.
just basic information, like if Tommy had just some basic information about how far the project has come along, or, I mean, he could pass that on to us and we could just,
I'd like to have that available if anyone asks.
yeah,
I don't.
yeah, I don't think it's up for discussion.
I don't want the idea of us presenting an update of.
I don't
Yeah,
think we need
that's
the
not a-
PR for. I don't
Yeah,
like that at all. I will hope, I don't think this can go on the agenda yet, but hopefully by then I will have an EV updates for the chargers. My hope is that by that point we'll have a firm plan to announce, so maybe a question mark on that one.
We could, so I think probably worth saying just a little bit about zoning, as always. I don't think it's a major update because we kind of did the big push, but then that brought up the idea of short-term rentals and maybe giving a little update of kind of where things stand there. That the idea is to kind of let fire inspection be the driving force for now and see how that plays out.
It could just be a zoning overall update, right? Like,
Yeah, I
what
think
goals
that
for
could
each.
be part of it. Yeah, zoning. Yeah, that could definitely be part of it.
Why don't the two of you, design something completely different? Completely, come up with whatever looks nice, and let's not do bullet point topics. Let's talk about, update on village projects, policies, and collaborations. And then we can cover anything that happens to be relevant, from Camp Barton to, grant applications to, I would probably, if we have time, I might rebroach the subject about what we're actually doing about the fire hall. We'll be meeting in the fire hall. And I think as I was working through this stuff with MRB, I do think we need to create a timeline for something, not just leave it open-ended and we hope we get enough money someday to build a new fire hall. I think it has to be, here's the brass ring and here's the multi ring.
We're approaching 10 years of this conversation
for a really long time. And I think particularly post-pandemic. We need to.
and by chance, if we're awarded that grant of $1 million, then it has to be spent within that 3 years, we need to have our plan, I would imagine.
And I kind of like what we did last year, which we tried to stay away from being too much department based and to talk more about the projects and the policies, kind of get one level above, just like a report out. And that also left a little more time, I think, for Q&A, which was useful.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think, between the meeting room and Zoom and YouTube, if people want to know kind of the day-to-day department stuff, they can tune in meetings at their leisure. But the kind of the overview, the Keith, you used the phrase blue sky conversation. I think that State of the Village is a nice place to have those conversations, whether it's zoning or state parks, fire halls, or the big stuff people should know about. Whether they pay attention to it or not is up for debate, but multi-million-dollar ambulance agencies and costs associated with it. So
I like that. I think what I find is that some people come and they hear the snippets and they don't understand the broader context. So if we think of it as, in that regard, the broader context, I like that a lot.
Well, I think I have to go back and look at the notes if I could ever find them, but I think the first State of the Village, really part of the impetus for it was simultaneously kicking off the water system upgrade and the sewer plant renovation.
It was announcing bills
Announcing.
increasing.
Well, announcing bills increasing, announcing saying we're taking on an $11.5 million
Right.
project, 2 projects totaling $11.5 million, and we have to, and there's no choice, but let's explain why.
Also stop flushing baby wipes is what I remember.
Yeah. Debbie.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's a key point. So maybe this is the same idea, between policy and large projects. I like that form.
I mean, we are 10 years away from those projects. We just had to rebuild our first engine.
Yeah.
That's a fun update.
Okay, good. So we'll have something to look at in the next week or so, I guess. All right, next item of new business is a resolution for us to consider regarding Seneca Meadows. Ben, I believe you put this together. If you want to.
Yeah,
give us
I can
overview, or we can read it.
I think reading it might be better just because it's rather long unless people haven't already, but I was just gonna say a little bit of the genesis of this. This is a fairly formulaic resolution. Happy to adjust and change in any way, but this is a formula being passed around by groups that are concerned about the expansion of the Seneca Meadows landfill. It is currently set to, let me see if I can find it, plan to come offline, I think now this year. And then there's a new plan now to expand it for another almost 8 years to 2032 and allow for additional expansion in space. All of that being somewhat concerning, being just to the north of us in this area that is so based on agritourism and looking to be designated a national heritage area and so forth. This is something that the county has taken up, the town has taken up, and has now been asked by a number of residents at different points for us to consider. So I took the liberty of basically taking the stock resolution that's available and putting Village of Trumansburg in all the right places. But again, happy to see if we want to change anything. But in looking through it, I think it, at least to my eye, tended to fit kind of strike the balance that we typically tend to strike, which is not get involved in too much outside of the village and where it directly impacts the village. But this really does kind of go on to say, how this does impact immediate location. It isn't terribly too far north of us. There's certainly truck traffic through the village, as well as potential for all manner of other sorts of expansions and leaching and so forth into the area, into the Finger Lakes. And to that extent, it does impact tourism and agriculture and so forth. That's so important here. So, just gonna leave it at that and see if there's any thoughts or ideas.
There's 2 dates here. There's a 2024 date, and then a first resolved has a 2025 date. Do we know which one is?
Let's see.
The last whereas in the first resolve.
Let's see if I've got something about that. Good point.
Any initial thoughts while Ben is checking dates?
So I have not kept up at all with the progress of this. I've heard in a very peripheral way that it is happening and that there is some contention about it. And I think for me, these things always kind of trigger questions about what the alternative is. Does the closure of this facility result in moving or waste management more to the periphery where it will inevitably impact poor populations? Or is this something where it's like we know where it will go and it's an established? Do you have a sense of what the alternative is? Do you know?
I don't know. The parts that I'm aware of, my understanding is that this isn't actually where our local garbage is going. It is primarily,
So I'm not,
Yeah.
that's not what I mean.
Okay,
I just
that's
mean, like,
fair.
the garbage.
right, so just
general.
garbage in general. I don't know where garbage would get redirected to on this. I actually don't know if anyone particularly knows for sure. I think the idea is that my guess is that, as with anything, there's an economy for this. So if this closes and this was the cheaper place that people were shipping it to, then it goes wherever the next place is that's second most cheap to
Right.
move garbage to, but I don't know what that would be. I think the argument there is that if it drives up the cost of garbage, maybe that pushes back through the system of, well, now your garbage tags are more expensive. Well, now maybe you try and be
Throw
more
away less.
considerate about doing less. That's the ideal, obviously. Is that a reality? I mean, people's habits are hard to change. It's hard to know at what point people really make that change, but that would certainly be the hope.
I mean, I will say philosophically for myself, I mean, I think I'm conceptually in support, but that worry is always there. I mean, the history of like waste disposal is, poor Black communities in Georgia receiving trash from New York City, right? Like that's how this starts. That's like the origin of the phrase environmental justice is based on like putting our trash into poor Black communities in the South because it was cheaper than, keeping it in more affluent white communities in the North. And that's what makes me really, really nervous. But I do like the idea of not, causing further damage to a community in the Finger Lakes. I think that's, hopefully that goes without saying. All of which is to say, I'm really not terribly aware of this, and maybe I should have been. I'm not accustomed to weighing in on external issues yet, I guess. So I haven't really done due diligence on this.
If we felt more comfortable, I mean, I'm sure someone from the town's environmental group could come and give a chat and kind of catch us up to date if that would make us feel more comfortable about.
I
the
thought one of the
details.
comments was from my uncle. I could evidently reach out pretty easily.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we all know people who are fairly passionate about this one way or another.
Yes.
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
I will just say on the date thing, that is what the town passed. And now I'm trying to find I was fairly sure at one point there was a stock version that I didn't have anything filled in. I'm trying to find that now to see what that was.
Well, it was 2025, but I don't know when that would be, so is it December 31 this year, January 1 next year kind of thing, or is it?
Yeah.
I mean, I have been following it and I have been watching the news. Madison County right now is going also through this same situation.
Where's Madison?
Isn't that
West.
West?
Or south of Monroe, west of Livingston, I believe.
I mean, there's been a lot of public meetings, there's been a lot of. I mean, one where I certainly understand the ecological and the environmental impacts of this. And there is another side of it, which is financial.
It's Trustees about.
I just, wondered if they had made, like you said, it's not that it's any of our business, it's going, all the money and everything that is generated by this place, it's not gonna really impact.
Well, the money wouldn't come here, but I do think it is in our, I wouldn't bring it up if it wasn't in our interest. I do think it's in our interest in that trucks are gonna go directly through here, that it puts at risk the natural.
Oh, I totally
environment
understand
near-
that.
Directly around us, right?
I
But
agree.
yeah. But yeah, the money is, to the extent that there's money and stuff, that's a Seneca problem.
Exactly, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
except as it regards tourism, I mean, I feel like we are an ecosystem. The Finger Lakes are. I
Yeah.
do think we have an economic interest here. that
Or-
is.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
No,
I
I was
agree.
thinking of the like, I know that there's money that's paid directly to
Oh,
like
yeah, yeah.
the municipality directly impacted.
Yeah.
But you're right, right? There's
Mhm.
financial tourism reasons, there's agricultural job reasons, wine industry. You know,
I do
all
understand
those,
those parts,
yeah.
but I also worry for a community that's gonna lose like. $300,000 to their school district and is going to lose 125 jobs and gonna, it's not a huge area. You just wonder what happens when something like that dries up, what's going to replace that type of income.
Yeah.
But like I said, I mean, I'm sure those discussions are being had over there.
Yeah.
It's not. I
Right,
certainly
right.
understand the environmental concerns.
I do think
of
it's a little bit like coal mining, right? Like, it feels like, oh no, if it leaves, what will we do? And then if it leaves, everyone will be immensely happier. Like, it will be better for health. It will be better for the economy of the area on the whole. So there's like this short term, maybe acute. People will lose their jobs and that will be hard, but we hope that they will find other jobs. And in the long term, it will be much better. I
Yeah.
think selfishly for us, it's definitely an improvement, right? Like, unequivocally. But it is, I mean, both for us and for the more local community to the landfill.
Well, assuming a private company doesn't come along and decide to build one closer to us. Because they need to fill a need. I mean, that's my general concern with looking at stuff like this is. I think philosophically, the heart is in the right place to say you don't want more of this. But what are the unintended consequences of? Like, there's already 350 acres of trash there. They're asking for 47 more. Is it better to give them 47 more, or to have somebody come along and build it somewhere else in the Finger Lakes because the trash has to go somewhere? I'm not saying that's going to happen. I think I don't want to see more landfills, but I can appreciate that humans probably aren't slowing down the amount of waste they generate to the point where we don't need them anymore.
Nor are companies building things that last forever. I mean, you go to get something now, and if you tell us a person that's helping you at a store that it's 7 years old, they're like, wow, you got a lot of use out of that. Or I still have a Welco refrigerator that my grandparents had in my basement, and I'm sure if I plugged it in, it would work today. I'm confident.
I mean, I'm gonna have a hard I think I'm gonna have a hard time not supporting a resolution that says don't expand a landfill. But at the same time, I think for us more specifically, looking out for the village of Trumansburg, I think my number one concern would be the traffic, so if 47, so the articles I read was they want to build a 47-acre valley. This resolution is saying 47 million cubic yards of airspace. I don't know if that's a direct conversion to acres, or it's just trying to make it sound bigger.
I think and that is the like three-dimensional space of you build a valley and then what's the volume in that value. I think is the idea, but it also does say the 47 acres of.
Oh, right, yeah, that's right there.
And I did read an article about the trucking. There has been huge discussions about the trucking and making sure that the trucks use the throughways and use the bigger roads and don't come through small village. I mean, we're on a state road.
Well, that's the problem.
Yeah, you can't. You've got 227, we've got 96, we've got 89, runs right through everything.
Yeah.
I mean, has there been any testing or any documentation showing what that particular landfill does to the air quality of Trumansburg and things west of, I guess, south,
Right.
south of this area?
Yeah, I don't know. Right, they allude to that here, but I don't know of anything specific. Unless it says, let's see. I mean, they're asking for. That's sorry, a broader thing.
I mean, certainly the air quality affects the people that live there.
Right.
I do my shopping there because I don't want to go to Ithaca. I'd rather go where the landfill is.
Yeah, and so I
That's
think
another conversation.
I think the question for us then is supporting the plan as it already was, which was to close it versus reopening that plan, rediscussing that plan and saying, yeah, we were gonna close this, but actually the right move here is to really reopen it, expand it and have it work for another 8 years. And I just don't see that being the right choice.
I'm sure they have a plan B.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Sure.
And
I
they're
mean,
gonna
they
make
know
it, they're gonna make Plan B sound like horrific, right? They don't. Because they want to expand. So I would be a
well,
little.
because the
careful.
reality, I'm sure, is it's always easier to expand, even as much as people are opposed, than to start fresh, right? I don't.
Right,
see a
because all the
world-
infrastructure and everything is there, everything.
Right, I mean, not only right, is it just logistically more troubling, but I don't see any community these days.
Has the DEC even concluded their, last I knew, the DEC hadn't even concluded their studies yet, right?
Right, no, my impression is that's still ongoing, and that's partially what the
The
idea for
holdup is.
why people are wanting these resolutions, are pushing for these resolutions now is to say to the DEC. In fact, this would be forward enough to the DEC to say, hey, we want to be involved in that process. We want to have a little more involvement in that process, and that we would like to see it stick with the current plan of being closed.
I think I read a quote from the town supervisor up there that one concern is if it closes, the company could be far more likely to not care to take care of the trash isn't going away.
Well, that was another thing I was going to ask it. Once
What
it's closed,
happens?
do they just like pick up and leave and everything's just like, there's gotta be some sort of maintenance that the state of New York
You would hope.
requires them to.
I'm sure that's.
You would,
It's gotta be.
I can't speak specifically, but I think it's more like a place by place, everyone's got its own policy, but yeah, you would certainly hope that you can't just.
You would
Leave.
think that people would be monitoring that, correct? Yeah,
Right.
gosh, I would hope.
I do feel like the way our environmental regulations work goes can be confusing, right? Like they may have paid into a fund and now DEC monitors it for the next decade, or it may just be.
That's
You just
usually,
own that as a state now.
yeah, that's often the case how those get structured.
Yeah. I will say for my part, I would prefer to have, like, to research more before I wanted to. I think if there was resounding support, I'm kind of with Keith. I can't see myself voting against this. But I would certainly feel more comfortable if I actually knew what was going on here, and I really don't.
Are you thinking that as your own research, or would it be helpful again, I think, to have someone maybe from like our town environmental board or something to come just walk us through the details?
I mean, either way. Certainly one doesn't prohibit the other, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe I can find someone who is willing to kind of give a little spiel for our second meeting.
So in the resolution, it mentions forwarding a copy of this to state and federal representatives in other municipalities. Have any of those representatives weighed in already on this? Is Anna Kellis weighed in? Has anybody else spoken to this?
I believe so.
I think they have.
Yeah.
Check. Yeah, I'd be shocked if they didn't, but I'm just.
I mean,
I guess I was wondering what the
I,
impetus was for having us do a resolution when we are part of the town, the town has already done it, and we're part of the county, and the county has already said that. Is it just to like add one more name to the list of people that?
Well, it's not uncommon that you just want to rally municipal support.
yeah, I think there's definitely a meaningful weight to be carried for local municipalities doing something like that. Not to beat a dead horse, but that is precisely why things like this get moved to poorer communities, because their municipalities don't have the bandwidth to take things like this on.
So Anna and the this is back in April of last year. She's been pushing for it to close a long time.
I heard Leah Webb's name in there somewhere
Yeah,
too.
it will certainly be also.
I just noticed that the Dropbox version didn't have their names actually in there, so I've added those in. It just had placeholders.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are, and I'm perfectly happy with another, having more information presented to us. I mean, from my perspective, I look at it as really a question. I don't know that it is a worthwhile expenditure of this board's time to debate what to do about trash in general. I think trash in general is going to be a reality of life until Elon invents a way to use it as fuel for cold fusion, or some such electric producing enterprise that changes the game, right? So the question is really, because of our location in the Finger Lakes, do we want to support the continuation of a landfill in the heart of the Finger Lakes or not? I think, to me personally, the most compelling argument in this resolution is the sixth whereas. We're looking, it's likely, and we're expecting that the Finger Lakes region is going to be designated a national heritage area. Would we, if we lived in the region, would we support a landfill in Yellowstone?
Right.
Or, at the foot of Mount Rushmore in the Black Hills? If the answer is no to those sensitive locations, then I am sensitive to the notion of, well, the trash has to go somewhere. And what about the folks who live where the trash ends up? But this isn't NIMBYism where we're saying it's a good thing, but we just don't want it. We're saying it's a negative thing that may be a necessary evil. But if there are places where the necessary evil doesn't belong, is there anywhere where a necessary evil doesn't belong more?
Right.
In sensitive ecological
Areas.
areas like
Where we are surrounded by lakes and.
national forests and national heritage areas, and the Finger Lakes watershed being as important as it is to the economy of the region, which is growing in the agricultural sense and is shrinking in the technological, in the industrial sense, and has been for decades. If this is a future Napa Valley region, which Napa Valley believes because they're investing here, and it's not a future, as much as we were having a conversation the other day about the renaissance of the Rust Belt in Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Buffalo, largely due to their sports teams, not their industry. If we believe that that's the case in this region with respect to the Finger Lakes, then we should want fewer landfills, less truck traffic, and more housing. I think those things go hand in hand. So that would be, this is not in my wheelhouse of things to normally spend a lot of time pushing for, but I think there's compelling reason to take this particular side in this conversation because of where we live.
Keeping it simple in a way.
Right.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Well, I think those are good points, but it also goes back to what you first said, Ben. Right? That is that necessary evil, somebody becomes somebody else's problem. And who is that? Other people. Right. I mean, it's 2 million tons of trash a year go to this place. I don't think that 2 million number is going away. So where's it headed? And I hope the answer is not somewhere else in the Finger Lakes, obviously, to Road's point, or somewhere else, and even in New York State. I think there's probably a good argument that says, Central New York's done its part for a number of years to take waste from quarter of which is coming from New York City, apparently. So we've done our part there, but
I think that's true to an extent, but I think there's a piece there that's missing. Like, bigger picture, we need to have less waste. We're not going to get rid of all of it. We need to have less, and there's no forcing function for creating less waste if we just let everything, all the current landfills continue to grow and expand, right? Like, there needs to be some sort of back pressure on that system. And in my mind, closing this one, closing any other ones that were already planned to be closed, and just holding them to the already plan that we had of closing them, is really in keeping with obviously our local needs. But if we're looking big picture for a moment of like what other secondary impacts are there, this is an important part of creating pressure in that system. If we don't see this happening in more and more places, then we'll just continue to have trash be something I buy ring of stickers for $10 and I don't really think much about. But if that ream of stickers were $20 or $50, I might start thinking about, how many plastic bags am I using? How many boxes am I using? Like whatever these different things, how much more can I recycle? What can I do to reduce my waste? And that's the kind of mindset we need to kind of start getting into. So I think the reason to have this conversation is because of the local implications. So I'm definitely on board with Roden on that. But I think if the concern is, well, we're just going to push this elsewhere, like I think we can't just leave, we have to have some other option here other than leave it open because we might push it somewhere else, because that will lead us to a place where we never close any of these things, right? So we need to come up with something else. And I think it is closing things. Maybe some of that spills over in some places, but it incrementally becomes more expensive every time that we close it. And I would support people closing landfills in historically underserved neighborhoods and so forth, right? I think that
This is
would
what
be the approach.
happens though. And I remember this from back in the 60s and 70s. You start closing those and making it more expensive because people get rid of their stuff. They're just gonna dump it. They dump it now and they're gonna dump it and they're gonna find a place to put it. And then you're gonna have, probably nobody remembers the commercial with the Indian. I mean, our roadways used to be horrid. I remember it, the traveling as a child, they had the amount of waste on the side of the road, but,
I think that's actually a good argument for what that's saying, though, is that cultural shifts do happen. And the only way to push cultural shifts is through sort of the marketplace. My question would be, does your argument that we have to do some sort of market solution for this, we have to put some pressure, does that outweigh whatever the alternative to this site is? And those are, like, at least for me, I feel like I'm balancing unknowns. I'm balancing complex unknowns. I'm balancing complex unknowns that I'm not sure anyone has a good answer.
Right, unknowable.
right.
And so I find myself wondering and thinking of Roden in 2014, saying, how do we best use this board's time? And how, like, to what degree is our bandwidth and our capacity best allocated to things like this? And I struggle with that. But I think for this, there is enough of a local implication that it's worth talking about. But I do think the trash on the side of the road is actually a very good argument for something like this, that like cultural changes do happen, right? Fines were increased, signage was increased. We can move in a positive direction. But I really would feel better if I could look into what's actually at foot here, because I really, I'm just, like I said, not prepared to weigh in on external issues.
What?
What I said 2004. When I started the board, Martin, you were impassioned speeches about how we should never weigh in on this or that. And at that point, the Iraq War was still, in people's minds, and local boards had weighed in on that. So that was the example you used, and it stuck with me.
We already made an exception by that point. For the fracking, right?
Mhm.
Well, that's.
Well, I'm also happy kind of in the interest of our own time, if it feels like the best path forward is to table this for our second meeting and come back around at it. I think that is reasonable. I think we've kind of all said what we want to say. I think it's just a matter of sitting with it
Yeah,
a
I
little
think
bit.
we all agree with the logic of it for
Yeah.
sure. I mean.
So then
I kind of
let's,
do what Gordon said, just if you think about the simplicity of the bottom line of it, it makes it a
Yeah.
little bit easier to not think it to death.
I think, because that's, I think, the thing, right? I think
'Cause
we can talk about market forces and trash cycles and
And the financial implications for the area, for the people that live there.
right, but I think that's,
I'm like, okay,
Right.
I'm
Just.
but I think, right, and I think I think the wisdom of how we use our time is about keeping it on that local focus. And so then I think to your point, when you get kind of simple about it, it makes a lot of sense. But why don't we table it till the second meeting and give ourselves a little bit of time to think about it?
You want to try to have someone next week do it on Monday, the 22nd?
I'm happy to, maybe I feel like I want to be sure that we're not wasting someone's time. So
Or do you just want to research anything?
I will certainly look into it myself. I mean,
I think that I'll
but,
probably pass on.
I mean, I think I know where I stand, so.
I'll probably pass on having someone present and we'll just, we can take it up then.
The last thing I was just say, Ben, I do agree with you that there has been a closure plan in place. So I think that's a strong argument for certainly somebody you would hope would think, we know when this thing is going to close, we better have a plan for what to do because trash isn't gonna stop.
I certainly would like to know
Yeah.
what happens to a landfill that is is closed. Who monitors that? Who's responsible for?
Yeah, well, I think it, to Ben's point, I think it's different each place. Sometimes it's on the. I mean, it's hard to actually ever keep responsibility on one company because they could go bankrupt, they could,
Right.
whatever. So I think typically if the strongest way of managing that typically is to kind of make it the state's problem, but to have a large chunk of money set aside in escrow around that, or however well they structure that.
I think they do have something like that in this case, but I don't know who holds it. If it's
Right.
like a fund held by Seneca Meadows, or if it's a fund held by
Right.
DEC.
I know that they're looking for a similar fund structure for Cuba salt mine too. That like, if Cargill were to pull out of that, which is getting rumored, who deals with that for the next forever,
Who
right?
owns the.
Right, so.
Yeah.
You get to own a hole.
All right, so we continue. Any other items of new business? We have need of an executive session.
I don't have anything new.
I have one quick thing, I think.
And I would entertain a motion to go into executive session. To discuss today.
Please.
Please. Personnel.
No move.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, good day.